Bruno, I saw you on my calendar today, and all I could do was smile because of the man you are, the leader you are, and the person that I know you are. Anyone listening in, you're about to have, I'm going to say, a moment with me and Bruno, as he is someone that I would call one of the most influential people in my life, and he doesn't even know that. Because, and again, I'm already tearing up talking to you and thinking about it, going, by title, you are the president of Incenter, but you have just this unbelievable leadership background. But I always believe that the man that's on in front of me has been built by someone else, right? God first, but you have been influenced by amazing parents, other influential leaders. And so I guess my first question for you is, who's influenced you to be the leader that you are today?
Okay, so it's a little complicated question because I believe everybody needs mentors. And I always tell everyone that I'm not a really smart guy, but I was really, really intelligent about finding the mentor that would help me and then listening, which is the key part, listening. And so, obviously our first mentors are our parents, right? I mean, that goes without saying. And although we fought it all through our teens and 20s, our parents didn't know what they were talking about. But obviously it comes around and you realize who you are is really a product of your parents. And then, my first work partner, I think I might have told you this, but he made me work in every department in the factory. It was a factory job. I was an accountant. And that's how I started out in the industry. And, he made me mix chemicals and shipping docks and all kinds of things. And I really disliked this guy pretty severely for a year. And then when the year was up, he brought me into the accounting department. He said, now you're ready. Now you can manage the company because you know every phase of it. And he said, don't ever think you can manage something if you don't know every phase of the business. So I carried that with me for most of my career. Started out in mortgage, I actually spent a week in post-closing because I wanted to know everything runs downhill in a mortgage business. So they get all the garbage in post-closing. And so I wanted to know, did I cause that garbage? How could I not make that garbage roll down there? So I worked in all the departments and learned the business basically from the ground up and found that I could lead better if I knew exactly the process. So my first mentor taught me that, and then I was starting to feel my oats and I was getting a little successful. And I had a friend, an old neighborhood, older guy. And he said, I guess he saw that I was getting a little too big for my britches. And he said to me, don't ever, ever, ever forget where you came from, because it's the biggest mortal sin you could ever create in your life. And so he kind of got me in check, and I realized, that I couldn't kind of get out over my skis and be a big shot. I needed to be, down to earth and realize, all the things, where I came from and who I really am. So he helped me tremendously. And then I got to meet a guy that really formed who I was as running a business. And he owned the largest, he sold his company for $9 billion. But for whatever reason, I met him. He liked me, took me under his wing. And I probably told you the story, when I first sat in the CEO's chair, and, we all do this as we work for companies. We say, if I were in the chair, I would do this. We all do that inventory. We have that little guide of what we think we'll do. And then all of a sudden you're sitting in the chair and you realize, okay, it doesn't happen that fast. It doesn't work. And, after like 4 or 5 months, I was very, very frustrated. Being an A personality sales guy, I was, very frustrated. And I asked if he would have lunch with me, and he agreed. And, I just kind of went crazy. And after about 20 minutes, he said, are you finished? Can I talk? And, I said, sure. And he said, okay, let me give you the rule here. To be a great leader, you have to listen. You have to be patient. You have to respect them. And I was waiting a minute, and he said, and let's face it, kid, they're your worst 3 qualities.
He did not say that to you.
He did say that. And he was right. I didn't think he was right that minute, but he was right. And he said, and so we have a lot of work to do in the next year. And he met me every week for lunch for a year. And at the end of the year, he said, mission accomplished. You're ready. You can do this. And as I got up, he said, and all that is so good. Isn't that amazing? You're going to be really successful, but that has nothing to do with your life. And he said, do you know the one thing, the only way I will ever be proud of you? And I was like, no. And he said, I need you to touch one person in your life. Then you've led a quality life. And lucky for me, I get to touch a lot of lives. When you're running an organization, you get to touch a lot of lives. So it's been, and he passed away. He was in his 80s when we started this venture, and he passed away. And every time something like that, I get an opportunity to touch someone's life, I think, oh, hey, Mr. C's proud of me. And so these guys have been so influential in who I am. And then I was single for a good part of my life, and I meet my wife, and she was my biggest cheerleader. And I never really got that, whatever kind of relationship you're in, your better half has to be a cheerleader for you, or you can't succeed. You just can't. It's too hard if it's not that. And I tell everybody the meltdown story. I go into GMAC, and everybody's yelling at everybody. We had aged loans. We had one day we were negative at the bank, and they're screaming and yelling. And I truly think this guy saved our company. I don't know if you know Barry Beers, but he's a great guy. And he called me into his office, and he said, hey, listen, I need you to bring Sandy with you, which is my wife, and she was in the industry. And I said, Barry, I don't think so. I mean, I'll have to grovel a lot to get her to she was retired at the time. He said, well, I'm just telling you, it would be a great idea. And they had worked together in a previous company. So we went in, and he went through all of this stuff. And he said to her, I'm going to renew the warehouse agreement. And you need to re-sign the agreement. And, the agreements are like this thick. And I said, well, I need my attorneys to review it. And he said, no, that's not going to work out. The only thing I changed in the agreement is the last page. So I turned to the last page, and it said, Sandy must come back to Gateway Funding full-time, head of capital markets. And I'm like, okay, well, and without hesitation, she said, okay. And Barry looked at her and said, are you crazy? Do you know where this industry is going? And like the greatest thing anybody ever said about me is, she goes, I don't want to see him fail. It can't get any better than that, right? So I've had all these people who, I just look at it and say, look, I'm just this ordinary guy who's been touched by a lot of different people, and I get to do that to other people, right? And so I think it's just the greatest thing in the world. I mean, I'm the luckiest guy, and this, I always use the phrase, I'm truly blessed. I don't know, I can't figure out exactly why, but I feel like I've been, like, I don't know what you want to call it, but touched, and someone looking out for me, my whole life.
Through all the years, everything you just shared, anybody listening in, I kept going, man, some of these leaders took a chance, right? They first of all, they were blunt with you and honest, knowing you could rebel and move away. But I think they also knew you were coachable, right? And look where you are today as the president of Incenter. And anybody I talk to that knows you or knows of you could not say enough wonderful things about you as a person and as a leader. And the fact that somebody brought you in under their wing, Mr. C, I guess is his name.
Yeah.
Said, I'm going to teach you something. And for a year, that blessing that you got, that privilege, oh my goodness. And to know, I mean, you really just impacted me thinking, have I touched one person, right? And I certainly am prayerful I have. And I'm also thinking, do I continue to put it the focus of my life is to continue to touch every single person. That's why I started interviewing executives, because there's so much wisdom. And the wisdom quite often is of mistakes, I won't call them failings, I'll call them learnings. And so when you consider the character of a leader, because I was where you were, Bruno, I'm listening and going, oh, I remember being that little, oh, I got the title and now I'm a big shot.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, okay, listen, girl, you just got a title. It doesn't make you any different than the day you had before. It's time to shift it away from being about you and being about serving other people.
Yeah, it's funny, Casey, someone just said to me, I lost my top leader in Incenter about almost 2 years ago. And he's become a dear friend of mine. He's I told him this the other day, he's the poorest student ever, but he's my worst student, but he got a job offer to run a company, and it was an amazing offer. And so, we're still buddies. I still go visit him. We still have dinner together with our wives. He's just a good human being. And somebody the other day said to me, wow, man, that's really bad news. The guy left you. It's so rotten. He must be. And I said, wow, that's the opposite of what I thought. I felt honored that one of my guys is running his own company now. I thought it was a great thing. I felt good about it. And this guy was trying to make me feel bad that somebody would leave our company. But not only did he did leave our company, he stayed in the business. We have 6 of our Incenter business lines in his company we're doing business with. Okay, so if I wanted to put it into, well, it was a good thing because we got more business, which wasn't what I was thinking, but you can justify it that way too, because he left with, I honored him when he left. I didn't tell him he was some, crazy bad dude because he left. So,
Sure.
it's just, I don't know. It's sort of easy to me. I don't know. It comes easy to me now. It didn't when I started this venture. But
Sure.
if you remember in 2019, the whole industry thought we were going to have a bad 2020.
Mm.
And we had our national sales meeting at Incenter. And I thought a great team building thing would be, I'm going to present a question to them, break them down in teams. They would come back to me and say, hey, this is what we would do. And I thought I would get some wisdom, some insight into what they're thinking. And so I said, if interest rates jumps up 2%, well, that would have been a good thing, by the way, but it went up 2% in the next 30 days. What would your suggestion be that Incenter would stay afloat and keep fighting? And they broke up in their teams and they came back, and there were 12 teams. And the first 4 or 5 teams, the first thing on their list was, we'll let all these people go. And after the 4th or 5th one, we're sitting on the stage, and I really literally lost my mind. The first time I ever lost my cool in a business environment. And I basically tore into all of them, because remember, they're all sales guys sitting in the audience.
Right.
And I said, I'm going to really clean this up. But I said to them, no, we're not letting anybody go, because you're going to get off your butts and you're going to go sell to protect your fellow employees. That's your job. And you're going to do that right now. And this team building thing is over, because I just thought everybody's going to come up here and say the same thing. And I said to them, did you lay your brother off? I don't know, because you guys had a disagreement last week. Did you lay him off? You can't lay your family off. If we're preaching that this is our family, then wake up and help one another. So, and in this year, we've had to let a lot of people go. And it's pretty painful as far as I'm concerned. It's the worst thing that you could do. But we have to protect the other employees. I mean, we have to protect the business. But it is painful. And it happened so fast that we didn't have time to react, to make the changes that we probably could have made in a normal downturn of the market. This one just kind of fell off the table versus a gradual downturn. And it was really painful because we had to react quickly. And at that point, the only option was to lay people off. And that's still pretty heavy on my heart this year, because there was a lot of people. And in a down market, as you know, they won't be able to get jobs. And so it's not fun. It's not a good thing. But that's one of the bad sides of
Bruno, let me ask you, because knowing your heart and knowing the story you just shared up on stage, which, by the way, I can only imagine how you felt. And for that moment, for everybody else going, oh, I got the answer wrong, right? And it's like, when you can control it, then that's not the right answer. I see what's happening right now throughout the world. The number of layoffs that are happening, and it's breaking my heart. You've built an amazing culture. And I happen to know that because of some of the people that work there, as well as just getting to know you. And when you inherited where it is today versus when you first took over, how do you, and let's talk about the reality of the world, that there's tons of layoffs, businesses are struggling, and you've got employees. How are you retaining the culture and keeping people focused in the midst of having to do some of the hardest things a leader has to do?
So the first thing that we did was we reached out. We had a kind of town hall with all of our employees. And I said to them, would it be okay if I cut all of you 4 hours a week and that saved 100 of your fellow employees? And some of our business leaders in the day before's meeting said, you shouldn't do that. They're going to hate it. They're going to, it's going to be, bad in tomorrow's meeting. And I don't know deep in their hearts how many of them wanted to maybe disagree, but to the person that day on that town hall, they all jumped up and volunteered. So I knew at that point that they did care, that their cube mate sitting next to them would be saved. In 4 hours at some of these pays of, even if it's $40 an hour, probably impacted them a little bit, but didn't change their lifestyle. But it changed this person sitting in the cube next to them. It changed their life completely. So we did a little bit of that, which showed them who we were. During COVID, I think it was 11 or 12 different things that we did for all of our employees. We furnished dinner for them. We found that the mothers working from home sounds easy, not easy when you have little kids. Okay. So what we did is we hired a storyteller and we did a Zoom meeting for all the children for 2 hours a day. So the mother could actually work.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing visual that is for me.
Yeah, so we did all kinds of things like that. That I think they know. I think it's, I always say this, culture doesn't happen from today to tomorrow. It's a long, you have to earn it. You have to really respect them and you have to earn that from them, that they want to be involved in this culture. And I believe that we're there. And I think they would, I always say to people, I would stand in front of a bus for them and I know that they would do it for me. So, I think it just took a while. It took us a while to build that, but I just don't see how could it be any other way to not do that. We have 800 employees in the Philippines. Do you know if you send them a gift card for $25, you changed their life? That's in the United States, they would laugh at you because they probably can't buy coffee with their gifts. But in the Philippines, it's a big deal. So when we send them, and we did this like 5 times during COVID, when we send them a gift card for $50, that is completely life-changing. So I don't know why more people don't think of that. I think one of the most interesting things I read, and I think it was Jack Walsh, that it basically said, if you have employee satisfaction, they will do anything to help your company. And if you don't have it, you can't move that company. It's, our past owner at Gateway was not a really nice man as a person, but he would constantly call me and say, hey, I'm really tired of this. You believe in that touchy-feely stuff. And I would always say to him, he was a big developer. I would say, well, bring all your cranes over, bring your bulldozers, see if you can move our building 6 inches. And he would get crazy. He'd start yelling and screaming. And I'd say, oh, okay, because I can move it 6 inches. Let's see if you can do it. That's just the way I think you have to build your company.
In the times that we're in, when people do have choices, even though through the layoffs, there's still a choice. And it's obvious, it gets more apparent as people are sitting in their houses too, because you don't know what they're doing all day. You don't know if they're taking recruiting calls. But even if it's not just about retention, it's about being that kind of leader that really does touch someone's life. Because my legacy is not going to be that I ran a company. I hope it's that I made an impression on people's lives to be better and to extend, I would call it, extend themselves to other people. So if I can pivot for just a moment, because I happen to know a little bit about you, and I think there's just so much beautiful, there's a story that you sort of shared with me, and let's end with this story because I know I'm going to try not to cry. I'm trying not to cry. So if anybody, hopefully you get a feeling about Bruno right now, like this man really cares about his people. I mean, This is to me, you are the example for leaders to love their people and to not see them as just someone who's a worker bee, but someone who actually is another human being that you want to help have an impression. And I asked you one time about your picture on LinkedIn because I can barely see you. I mean, you're like this tiny little thing, and I'm like, Bruno, what's up with your picture? And anybody listening, go check out Bruno's picture. Go just link in with him. This is a wonderful man. Why that picture on LinkedIn?
I remember that day when you said to me, hey, that's the wrong, you need to change that.
Yep.
And so for me, the story was, I mean, my dad was a baseball guy and I love baseball. And, my dad played for 6 years for the Air Force, traveling all over the world. And so baseball was always a big part of our life. And he got really sick. This is 9 years ago. And he had never been to Cooperstown. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound right, right? So I got all my uncles together. I rented a big bus and we were going to drive up to Cooperstown and spend the day with my uncles and my cousins. And that week he made a really bad turn and he didn't get to go. But I went anyway because I thought I need to do this. So I took my best friend in life and him and I drove up there and we walked around, and what you see me in front of in my LinkedIn picture is, if you build it, he will come. Right. So, and the end is, Dad, you want to have a catch. So it was important to me. And when I stood in front of that and my buddy took the picture, it just seemed like I have to that has to be it. Right. And so, and anybody who's been in my office, there's an incredible wall I'm looking at right now, which is all about baseball and my dad. So it just made sense to me. So it didn't matter to me that it probably wouldn't get the visible thing and I would get business from it. And it wasn't really about that for me. It was about, I couldn't figure out a way to honor him, basically, about this background in baseball that has been through my whole life. So I just did it. And I remember when you called me and I explained to you, no, it's not about business. It's about him. And, I watched that movie way before he got sick. And every time I watched it, I cried. And so my daughters, the day of the funeral, as God would always be in my life, he put Field of Dreams on that day. And I watched it before we went to church. And of course, cried like crazy. And my daughter was like, Dad, stop watching that movie. It makes you cry. And I said, what better day should I cry? Tell me what better day I should cry about this movie. So when I went there to Cooperstown, that was it. That's why I did it.
You were obviously very close to your dad.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was, he's an old-fashioned guy. I'm an old guy. So he was an old-fashioned guy who didn't show any emotions. And it took me a long time to get my head around that. But I tell a lot of young people, especially, or people in my generation, is and this is going to sound harsh, but how I care about him. I don't ever remember him telling me he loved me. And yet all these other kids were doing that. But my dad, I call him an old-fashioned Guido. He wasn't going to show emotion. He thought that, crying was a weakness. He thought all of those things that generation thought about. And I didn't realize it, but I was angry inside my life, because I was always trying to do things to make him proud. Yet there was this inner anger. And then one time, for whatever reason, my cousin said something about my uncle, which is my dad's brother. And I snapped back at him. And I just think there's this divine thing. And I said to him, are you kidding me? I said, our dads, they were old-fashioned Guidos. But you know what? My dad went to work every day. He was home for dinner with us at 5:30 every night. And then went to work at night managing a bowling alley. And on weekends delivered beer. Stayed with my mom for 64 years of his life. He didn't have to tell me. He showed me every day. He lived it. But I didn't know that. I didn't see that until it was too late. So sometimes, and one of the interesting things, in The Natural, another baseball movie, is there's good in everybody. Sometimes you just gotta look really, really, really hard. And so I've tried to use that now and say, no, I've got to spend time here. I've got to look really hard and find that good thing in that person. So, it's just, I don't know. I get older, and I tell my kids all the time, the older I get, the older they get, the smarter I get. I don't understand how that works, but it seems to work that way. So,
Bruno, you and I are so equally yoked. I say that because I try to find the good in all. And, even in the bad people, but I don't know their story. I don't know their journey. And if I walked in their shoes, where would I be? So I've always looked for the best in others. And as a leader, I've learned from the bad leaders. I was one of them. And I've learned from the greats. And I would put you in the great category. And I'm blessed to call you a friend. I hope anybody listening in right now, if you're not saying I love you, even though you might be showing it, those 3 words really mean a lot to a lot of people. And if you are not spending time where you need to spend time, because I just heard about your father spending time where that showed lots of opportunities to grow together. And as I interview countless executives who have figured out along the way, with all our imperfections and all of the misgivings and the challenges and the lessons, I hope today In Excellent Company helps you realize the company I keep are the amazing men of Bruno. And with that, I wanted to say thank you.
By the way, one quick thing. The guy
Yes.
I told you is my worst student. Let me tell you why he's my worst student. Because what we do every day is really not that important. We're not curing world hunger. We're not curing cancer. What we're doing is earning a living to do what is important, which is our families. And he fails at that every day because I text him every night at 6 o'clock and say, I know you're at home eating with Margie and the kids. And when I don't get a text back, I know he's not. And so and he knows it. I tell him all the time. He was my worst student because he doesn't have that work-life balance. And I got to work harder at getting him to have that.
And you know what? Those nudges, those reminders, eventually he'll realize the wisdom of Bruno and what it takes. I mean, because again, when it's all said and done, what's your legacy? What will you leave? Bruno, I'm proud to call you a friend.
Thank you. I'm the same with you, by the way.
I got to interview you again, man, because I want to go even deeper on some conversations we've had in other arenas, because there's so many lessons with you. But thank you so much for today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Made me cry, and I held it back for anybody not watching. I just love this man. But for that, everybody can't wait to the next time with Bruno. But Bruno, thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.